Hello there, and welcome back to the Showing Up to Life podcast and YouTube channel. Art Burns here, you there. Let's do this. Just trying to switch up these intros a little bit. We'll see how that one that one lands. I don't know. It didn't feel too good, but I almost just hit the stop button so I could re-record that. But we'll let it sit there, okay? Because actually, that kind of very loosely actually connects to what I want to talk to you about today. So let's just accept that this is the way things are, okay? Acceptance. That's the word of the day. And we're really going back to a basic here. We're going really back to the sort of foundational or the fundamental concept that mindfulness is based upon, right? Which is the concept of acceptance, right? But now here's the thing. Acceptance is a very tricky term. And it's most especially tricky for those of us who live in the Western world, right? Especially in America, right? We are not taught as children, and we are not told by any advertising or any education or any forces out there at all that we are to accept anything, right? We are to change the things that we should change, right? We are to take control. We are to, relieve the headache right away. We are to, when we feel like we don't have what we need, we're supposed to just go out and buy the thing that we need, whether it's a new, sweater, a new car, a new house, whatever it is. And so acceptance for us is hard to wrap our heads around. So I thought it would be worth it to kind of come back to this concept and do another episode about it. Now, I would guess there's probably a minimum of 30 different episodes over the course of the almost 700 episodes that I've recorded here, which is just barely 5% of them. I would guarantee the 5% of these episodes I have talked about acceptance, okay? Because that's how, if not more, right? Because it's that important. It's that fundamental and foundational to the concept of what we talk about when we talk about mindfulness. And it's also foundational and fundamental to the practice of mindfulness and the skillfulness that we derive from mindfulness, because acceptance in and of itself is such a skill. Now, when we say acceptance, a lot of times I think what the notion that comes to people's mind is that, like it's more like a sense of surrender, which it is, right? It is a surrender. It's a surrender to the concept that, or to the reality that this is what is happening, right? But in no way does it mean that I am powerless to change what is happening. But here's the thing. I can only change what is happening in the emergent adaptation, which in other words means the next moment, right? I cannot change what is already happening. And that's really what acceptance means. Acceptance doesn't mean that, oh, well, I guess everything's going to stink from now on and I'm just going to be this, sad person for the rest of my life. I just got to accept it, like Art says. No. That's not what we're talking about when we talk about acceptance. Acceptance is just the reality, or just, again, the acknowledgement and the acceptance that this is reality right here, right now. And in a real important way, a very important way, this concept of acceptance is very closely tied to the concept of presence, right? Now, many of you know, or many of you have heard me say this before, I don't like to use the word present moment, okay? Even though that's, what it is, kind of, right? This is the present moment right now. This is the moment that everything's happening, right? But the concept of a present moment indicates that it's a thing, right? That it's a thing that could be divided, and a thing that could be divided again and again and again and again and again, like a second can be divided, right? Like when we watch that, hand tick from 1 second to the next, right? That space and time that took that second hand to move, we could divide that into millionths of a second. And we could keep dividing it almost endlessly. That's not the way the present moment, as what people mean when they say the present moment, means. What the present moment really is referring to is now. Very simple. Now. And even though it's very simple, it's extraordinarily important to understand this. right? Because now is the time that it's always been for your entire lifespan. From the moment you took your first breath till the moment you take your terminal breath from this life, it is always now. It is never any other time but now. I remember reading an Eckhart Tolle book many years ago. I think it's one of his big ones. I forget the name of it off the top. I think the Power of Now or something like that. But anyway, he says in this book, and I know I've said this before too, but this is an episode of coming back to the basics here. He says that nothing will ever happen in the future, and nothing has ever happened in the past. And I like, clap the book closed. I was like, what is he talking about? That's crazy talk. Come on, man. Are you kidding me? And immediately, my mind goes to, I graduated high school in June of 1987. Actually, I walked the aisle with a blank folder because I had to go to summer school that year, so I didn't technically graduate until sometime, in July or August. But anyway, my graduation ceremony was in 1987 in June at St. Patrick's Cathedral. There are photographs, there are probably newspaper articles, there are, records of that happening, right? And that can be confirmed, and that can be, absolutely known that happened. And so as I sit here now, that feels like it happened in the past, right? Of course. 1987 was, 30, 40 years ago now, right? But here's the thing. As I walked down that aisle of St. Patrick's Cathedral without a diploma in my little plastic maroon folder, it was now when that happened. It was right now. Every step I took down those tile, floors, the slate tile beneath my feet, it was right now. And it's always right now. Next Tuesday at 3:00, when you have your appointment, it's not going to be in the future or the past. It's going to be right now. And so in a very real way, and this is also extraordinarily important when we talk about acceptance, which we're going to come back to in a second. Don't worry, I haven't lost you. You haven't lost me, I should say. When we come back to the now, right? When we can recognize that this is the only time there is, and again, this is a skill, right? We have to practice it. We have to continually come back and directly experience now. And this is what we do in mindfulness practices. And when we do this, what we start to understand, and very vividly we come to understand this, is that the past and the future are not real. Now again, yes, there is historical record that Art Burns Jr. walked down the aisle of St. Patrick's Cathedral back then in June or maybe May of 1987. Yes, that happened. And we can look up what happened. We can see what happened. We can confirm what happened, right? But here's the thing. Confirming in a book that something happened does not mean, is not certainly the same as the felt experience of what happened. And that's the trick, right? Because right now, we are feeling the experience of right now. But when I look back on something in the past that is no longer real, it is just a memory. It is just maybe I can look up in a book and say, oh, it was raining that night, whatever I can experience in terms of confirming is just, it's just data, right? But when I look back on my graduation, and I look back on, what was happening in that moment, in that now, right? It is all colored by what I'm experiencing right now. So to give you a very, very simple and basic and almost like silly, in how basic this is, example, let's say I'm having an argument with someone, right now I'm having a really tough time with this. My nervous system is agitated. My emotions are raging. The thoughts in my mind are all swirling around in all kinds of anger and everything, right? And then somebody mentions my graduation from 1987. I am much more likely in that moment to think of the fact that I didn't actually graduate that night, or maybe the fact that it was, it might have been raining actually, now that I think of it. I might have thought about how, maybe some of the teachers who were really mean, and they were, there's no question about that. But the point is that I would think about the negative things because of what I'm experiencing right now. Okay? Because of this argument that I'm having, and this state of my body right now makes these memories, colors these memories in such a way that, the memory feels like something very specific, which is negative, right? But now let's say on another day, somebody reminds me of my graduation. Only this time it's, right after I've had a beautiful vegan dinner with some close friends and loved ones, and I'm feeling just euphoric in my happiness, right? Well, then I'm going to think about June of 1987 in a completely different light. I'm going to see that it was a beautiful moment. It was the ending of a process, and, friends that I made that I'll never see again. And I haven't for 40 years. I haven't seen these people again. And I might remember with nostalgia and beautiful appreciation what happened. Neither is really true, though, right? Because it's all just colored by whatever it is I am experiencing now. And of course, the same thing can happen with the future, right? You think about, a job interview, for instance, right? And if you're feeling really happy and really confident, and somebody just gave you, maybe you just went and got a haircut and somebody gave you a really great compliment. Well, hey, I'm going to nail that job interview. This is going to be awesome, right? Or maybe you get up and you get on the bathroom scale and it's up a couple of pounds when you're trying to lose weight and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I'm so, out of control. I just feel so horrible about myself. Well, I'm going to bomb this interview that's going to happen, right? Neither are true. The only thing that is true is now. The only thing that is actually happening is happening right now. So let's get back to acceptance, okay? When we talk about acceptance in the context of mindfulness, what we are saying is very, very simple. Right now, this is what's happening. No matter how much I don't want it to be happening, no matter how much I wish something different was happening, no matter how I could shake my hands and stomp my feet and scream to the heavens, this is it. This is what's happening right now. And so acceptance is the ability to, very simply, as the term implies, accept that this is what is happening right now. Now, again, it's really important to recognize that it does not mean, it's not a sentence of some sort, right? It's not like a prison sentence where, okay, that's it. It sucks for you and you got to deal with that. In fact, that's the opposite. When we cultivate our awareness of now and we start to understand that concept of, and when I say understand, I don't mean just with our mind. I mean like living it, experiencing it, and feeling it. That kind of knowledge, right? Experiential knowledge. When we cultivate that experiential knowledge and the skill of dwelling in this now, that's when we realize we actually gain something that we don't have when we're not really present with now. And that is the agency to make a decision that will positively influence the next whatever is happening. Right? Getting back to feeling confident, for instance, right? We can always do that through our actions now. And the only way we can do that through our actions now is by first accepting what is going on. Because what's the opposite of acceptance, right? The opposite of acceptance is resistance. aversion to what is going on. And what happens when we experience resistance and aversion to what's going on, that creates it encourages and promotes and even forces a departure from now. Because it's when we resist that, right? It's when we resist that whatever's happening is happening, right? That we experience negative emotions, we experience tension in our bodies, and we experience thoughts as a result of the emotions and tension, thoughts that, a storyline in our mind that is pessimistic, contrarian, critical, catastrophizing, and all the rest. And what happens then is that we get lost in all of that. We completely lose ourselves in that contrarianism, in that catastrophizing. I always joke about it, if I don't, I used to feel like when I was driving to pick up my kids, if I was late and I didn't get there on time, I could put together a story so fast that would have my kids growing up and living in a refrigerator box on Skid Row somewhere. Just because I was 5 minutes late picking them up, right? And so that story is what transports us, right? I'm just sitting here driving down the road on a typical, Wednesday afternoon on my way to pick up my kids. And all of a sudden I'm 30 years from now, in like downtown LA looking at my son begging for change. I'm not here anymore. And of course I am being funny. I'm trying to be comical about this, but that's the way the mind works. And so it is in the acceptance that, hey, this is it right here, right now. I'm late getting to my kids right now. If I accept that, well, then my mind doesn't go to that place of thinking about my kids in some refrigerator box. And maybe they're still together and helping each other out, maybe, I don't mean to laugh at people, of course, who are in those situations. I mean, it's horrible that there are people who live in that situation. So let's just take a moment and acknowledge that with compassion and with kindness in our hearts, right? That this is not a laughing matter, right? But I'm just creating the story to show you how quickly these things can happen. And so it is in the actual acceptance, like that is the key, is to accept right now I'm late. But that's all that it is, right? Because when I accept it, I then can see it more critically. And I don't mean critical in terms of criticizing it. I mean critical in this sense of critical thinking, right? I mean that I can sit here if I accept what's happening, and I accept that, like, whoa, my nervous system, my body, my thoughts, like what? Refrigerator box? Whoa. No, I'm just 5 minutes late. And there are lots of other parents there. There are lots of teachers, and there are lots of people, adults, responsible adults, who are going to make sure that my children are okay for 5 minutes until I get there, right? And if not, I can pull into this driveway and knock on that person's door and ask to use their phone, right? Like if it became an emergency, I could take emergency measures for it, right? But right now, sitting here, I am just 5 miles away from them, stuck in traffic, and life will go on. Now, of course, it's tricky when we're talking about our kids, because your kids are alone. There's actually a real, threat to that, right? But, this could happen in many, many different circumstances, right? Like how many times have you, thought like, oh, did I make a bad impression on that person who I have a crush on, right? And that'll get your mind going in the same way. But in that moment, you can say, no. I may have made some social gaffes. I may have said something that was, goofy, but maybe this person will like me even more because of what I said. I don't know that that's not true. I don't have the information right now to confirm this catastrophizing story in my mind. So let me tell you really quickly a story, the story of my own learning acceptance, okay? And this is the greatest lesson I've ever learned, okay? As many of you know, I used to operate a little bagel shop in a town outside New York City. And we would get really, really busy. I mean, we were a tiny little shop, but we were the only authentic bagels in the town where, most of the town was transplanted New York City residents, right? So they really loved their bagels, and we were the only source of bagels. So we were very busy a lot of times, right? And one morning, the cook who basically ran the whole kitchen, right? Like I was the front of house guy, right? I was the guy with the customers and giving high fives to the kids and making the coffee drinks and like doing my thing, right? And the guys in the back, they were the artists, they were the guys who were making the actual food that everybody loved. I baked the bagels at 4:00 in the morning, so that was all my stuff. But the sandwiches and all the stuff that they made on it, and even like mixing up the salads and the cream cheese and stuff, that was all those guys. Right. And without them, I would have told you, anybody who asked, I would have told you I could not do this without Jose, was a specific guy in the back. Once I hired him, I was like, I am never letting this guy go. Because he's that good, and I can rely on him to run this business, right? I can rely on him to run the kitchen of this business. And so I would have told you there was no way that I could run the shop even on one day if one of those guys didn't show up. If I was alone in the kitchen, there's no way I could run the business. That's what I would have told you. And I would have believed it. Like absolutely 100% believed it. Lo and behold, one morning, the cook who's on duty is a no-show. Just didn't show up for work. I call Jose. My wife's pregnant. We're at the doctor's office. I can't come in today. I can't blame Jose for that, right? That, you're here 6 days a week. This is the day you can't do it. Okay. Now, in that moment, I laugh about it now and I make it seem like, oh, yeah, so the guy called out sick. So I put on the apron, I got on the griddle, and I started cooking, But in that moment, I thought like the whole world was going to just crumble down around me. I thought there was no way that I could possibly get through this. And I spent the first, hour of that day just sitting there saying, why did this guy not show up? How could he do this to me? How am I ever going to get through this? By the end of the day, I'm going to be this mess. It's, we're going to lose customers. We're going to, I'm not going to be able to pay the rent, and I'm going to go out of business, and blah, 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 blah. Right? I spent literally the first hour, maybe even 2 hours doing that. Probably not. It was probably more like 20 minutes, to be honest with you, but it felt like forever because it was one of the hardest days I've ever been through. Okay, I mean, I got to tell you, like when you're looking at like 12 tickets across this rack and you're the only one cooking, oh my gosh, you have no idea the pressure that you feel in that moment. I mean, I'm laughing about it now, but in that moment, I was like, I got to close the doors. I can't do this. I got to close the doors. I can't do this. This is terrible. How could that guy do this? I'm going to, and again, into the future, going to go out of business. My parents are going to leave me. My wife's going to leave me. My kids are going to hate me. Everybody's going to hate me. I'm just a loser. I'm going to die, right? Again, I laugh at it now, but at the time, it was mayhem. It was absolutely horrific what was happening. But then something really, really beautiful happened to me. And I'll tell you, I would not wish this upon my worst enemy to go through that experience. But in the end, it was really beautiful because and I remember it, almost like it was yesterday, right? That I was sitting there and I had, eggs and everything on I mean, I don't even cook that stuff anymore. Like I can't even, but this was before I was vegan. So, but I had all this stuff on the griddle, like for, 5 sandwiches, and I had 8 more on the rack to do after those, And I remember at that moment, this feeling of peacefulness just descended upon me. And I said to myself, and really it was like having a conversation with myself. I said, wait a second, you're only making it worse. You're only making it harder. It is what it is, man. The guy's not coming in, and there's nothing that's going to save you. There's nothing that can happen that's going to change this. No matter how much you want to wring your hands and stomp your feet and curse the heavens and wish for this guy and all of his descendants to be plagued with some horrible affliction because he didn't show up to your bagel shop for his $15 an hour job. which, by the way, I always paid well above minimum wage to all these people. By the way, just throwing that out there. Minimum wage at that time was $7 and something, and I paid 15. So anyway, and I also paid time off, unless you no-showed without a warning. But anyway, the point is that in that moment, in that now, I recognized that no matter how much I did all that, no matter how much I wrung my hands, no matter how much I stomped my feet, no matter how much I yelled, how much I hated it, it wasn't going to change. Right? I couldn't close the doors. There were already people inside. They already paid for this food that I'm making. I'm already here. This is already happening. And there's nothing that's going to change that. So the only thing I can do then is to get through this moment, to just get through this now, because this is all there is. Right here, this egg that I flip right now. Now this egg that I flip right now. Now this egg. Now this sausage. This piece of bacon. Now putting the butter on this bagel. I cannot do any more than that. I will do it the best that I can. I will do it as fast as I can. And I will hope that, that it's acceptable to everyone else. I mean, it's a weird word to use. I hope that everybody will be pleased with my efforts. But I have to accept that some won't. But there's nothing I can do about that. There's nothing I can do about it. The only thing I can do is this breath, this egg, this whatever that's going on right now. And once I accepted that, once I was able to just recognize that, yeah, this is absolutely the worst day of my working life, bar none. Like, this is the hardest thing that I've ever gone through. This is going to be the hardest, 8-10 hours of my working life. But there's nothing I can do to change that. Nothing. Not with still, maintaining my life on some level. I mean, sure, you can always walk out. You can always just, put your stuff down and I'm done. And that is a form of acceptance as well, right? You can accept that this is just too hard for me and I cannot do this. And so therefore I'm going to stop doing it and accept whatever, consequences happen. For me, it felt a little bit just in that specific context. I had, there's other people here who are relying on this paycheck. Right? There's my wife and kids who are relying on me bringing home money for them, right? So this was not something that's just a decision just for me, right? So, and that also is part of the acceptance, right? As we accept that, no, I am bound here. There is a boundary here that does not let me leave, right? I have to accept that. Now, here's the thing about acceptance, and this is also, I'm sure I've done 20 or 30 episodes on this as well, but as we practice mindfulness, as we cultivate the skills of mindfulness, it's never about, some rigid spot that we find ourselves in or some rigid state in which we're holding ourselves. It's instead about returning over and over and over, which means that you don't just accept it once, right? Because the mind is going to continuously try to resist and to cry out of how horrible this is and what's going to happen later, because my brain is constantly trying to predict the future. That's what your brain does. Your brain is taking in what's happening right now and saying what's going to happen next. And specifically, is that dangerous or is it safe? That's what the whole thing is for. That's what our entire system is there for. And so as that process, unfolds in the now, and I do this little thing with my hands. Those of you on the podcast aren't seeing this, but I'm sort of creating this little space in front of me with my hands as I say the word now, because now is not a time. It is a space. It's a time and a space, because time and space are very related to each other that way, right? But it's a space in which everything unfolds through our whole lives. And but the thing to remember though is that my mind, my nervous system, the neuronal activity of my brain is always trying to move me out of this now, because it wants to know what happens next, because that's where danger might lie. So it's about continuously and repeatedly returning back and accepting over and over and over what is happening. So you don't just accept it once and it stays accepted. And the same thing applies for, forgiveness, which is really just a form of acceptance, right? That when you forgive somebody for something, which is really just acknowledging that this is what happened and there's nothing I can do to undo this, and so therefore I just have to accept it and just forgive it and just move on, right? That I do that, and then 3 seconds later, I'm no longer accepting it, and I gotta accept it and forgive it again. And again, and again, and again, and again. And that's why when we practice mindfulness, it is always about that returning, right? It is always about when the mind wanders, not if you fail and allow your mind to wander. The nature of the mind is to wander away from now. So meditation and mindfulness practices are about continuously returning. Well, first, it's about recognizing that we've wandered and then returning. And it doesn't matter if you do this 1,000,000 times a day. It doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. That's how we gain the skill. And as some of you, real quick, some of you remember my analogy of the gym, right? If you go to the gym and you just hold a barbell up like this, and I'm just doing sort of the flex mode, and I know I've said this very recently, pardon me for saying it again, but if I do this and I stand there at the gym for 8 hours like this, there's nothing going to happen to this muscle. I mean, maybe very, very minuscule change of density. But the workout happens when I release and then I contract again. I release and I return. I release and I return. And the same thing happens in our brain and in our mind, that when we recognize our mind has wandered and we bring it back, that's just like doing a curl at the gym. And if you keep doing that over and over and over, the mind gets stronger and the brain gets stronger, and your ability to recognize when you've wandered and your ability to return become more capable. If you want to learn about some of these practices, you want some coaching and some teaching to get you into them, all you got to do is hit me up with an email, art@artburnscoaching.com. That's the first step of a process that happens right when you do it, in the now. All right, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope we found this helpful. I wish you well, and I'll be back again soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.